Hey there guys, I'm Renee. I am the owner and artist behind Chicly Reclaimed Decor, and I am also a member of the Paint Couture creative team. And in today's tutorial, I'm going to be sharing with you how to transform this piece into an ornate 17th century French Baroque inspired design using iFlex wood molds, 2-part crackle, and glaze for an aged look, as well as sharing how you can antique an actual mirror to match. So if that is something you'd be interested in learning, guys, stick around because that's what I'll be going over today. Okay, so before we start things off, I am going to be removing this backing right here and setting it aside because we are going to be coming back to it later. I'm going to be using Paint Couture's Fresh Start. This is a TSP based cleaner, and it is absolutely fabulous for cleaning your furniture or any other pieces before you start any painting. Be sure to wear gloves when working with this product. You will need to mix 8 cups of warm water with 1 tablespoon of Fresh Start cleaner. Make sure to stir thoroughly for 1 minute to ensure the powder is fully dissolved and mixed. Then, using a household sponge, I went about giving this piece a thorough cleaning. Then I came back through and used water to rinse off any remaining Fresh Start solution. Now that our piece is prepped, we are ready to start designing. I'm going to be using this Rose Floral Decorative Trim 4150. This is an iFlex wood mold, as well as this Floral Decorative Trim number G0121. Now, if you didn't catch that, don't worry. I'm going to put a full list of iFlex and Paint Couture products that I used in this tutorial down in the description below, as well as my affiliate link, just in case I inspire you to pick up a paintbrush and do a little creating of your own. So what I want to do with this trim is I want to use it to create a beautiful ornate border around the edge of my mirror frame. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take my heat gun and slowly heat this mold up so that way I can unroll it. These are iFlex wood molds. They are wood composites, and when they are heated, they become malleable, making them flexible and easy to adhere to a variety of surfaces. And this is what it looks like once it was all rolled out. So after doing a little bit of math, I figured out that if I cut this trim in half, both of these pieces, I will have enough to go around the entirety of the outside of this mirror frame. So what I'm doing here is I am simply just measuring to find out where the middle is on this piece. And then I just keep doing that in intervals all along this piece. That way, when I come back, I know I'm going to have not only a straight line, but a line that stays consistently in the middle of this trim. Now I'm going to take my heat gun and warm this mold back up because it is going to make it that much easier when I take just a pair of household kitchen scissors to cut this trim. And then I just continued on with that same process, and this is what it looked like when I was all done with that. Because I'm using 2 different trims, I want to make sure that I measure so I can have an even design. I also am making sure that these 2 different trims transition at the same spot so that this design is cohesive. After measuring, I determined that I needed to cut 2 pieces of the Rose Floral Decorative Trim to 14 inches in length. Now, normally when you're doing trim, you measure and cut it at an angle so the 2 pieces can butt up right up against each other. But because this trim is being wrapped around the edge, it makes that kind of impossible for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut a straight line, and then later on in the video I'll come back through and share with you how I disguise that stark straight line with some beautiful floral molds. Okay, so now that our pieces are all cut, we are ready to start getting these glued down. So when I get to the gluing stage, I have found it much easier if my mold is already pre-shaped or contoured to the area that it's going on. So you can see here, I have been heating this mold up, bending it, and taping it in place to cool down. And I know it seems like an extra time-consuming step, but in the end, you will see that this actually saves me time. Just like any iFlex wood mold, I'm going to slowly heat it up with my heat gun and then bend it and contour it in place. Okay, so once it has had time to cool, I simply came back through and removed the tape, and then we are going to start the gluing down process. Here's a peek at that contoured iFlex wood trim. See how it has that natural curve to it now? It is going to make it that much easier when I go to glue down this trim here in just a minute. I'm going to be using Titebond Quick and Thick. I also like to have a wet paintbrush handy to wipe off any excess glue that might seep out during this process. So I'm going to put an even layer of glue on the back. Using a paintbrush or finger, I'm going to smooth it out. And then I'm going to press this contoured mold into place, use my heat gun to warm it up, and press down firmly. This is so much easier than having to glue, heat, bend, and hold the mold in place all at the same time. I also have found that I'm able to glue down a larger section of this trim at the same time, versus having to work on this trim section by section. Then using the tape from earlier, I'm just going to secure this mold into place. And I continued following that exact same process to adhere both of these trims to the border of this mirror frame. While you're here, please like, comment, and subscribe so you can be notified of more painting tutorials. This beautiful ornate mold is the Angel's Decorative Applique number 2958. I love using molds to completely transform the look of an item. And with the variety of designs available today, you can pretty much create any look that you are inspired to do. As you can see, I'm measuring to center my mold correctly. While you're watching this process, let's talk a little bit about that antique mirror idea that I had. So an antique or distressed mirror is a mirror having simulated marks of age and wear. You've probably heard of distressed paint. Well, it's kind of a similar thing. This piece at one time was a cabinet door that someone had repurposed into a dry erase board. Well, I didn't want to keep the dry erase board, but I didn't want to go and pay for a brand new mirror only to distress it. So I had this piece of mirror lying around that obviously already had some damage to it. So I figured this would be perfect for showing you guys the process. You will need gloves, plastic wrap, and paint stripper. I like to use citrus strip. We are going to be stripping off the paint on the back of this mirror. Please be aware that some old mirrors may have lead paint, so please use caution when doing this. I added a good amount of this product and I'm using chip brush to spread it out evenly onto the back. To make cleanup easy, I'm going to just take some garbage bags and put that underneath. Then, to keep my product from drying out, I'm going to add a layer of cling film over top. You will need a plastic or wooden tool to scrape off this paint with. The citrus strip product that I'm using has about a 30-minute to an hour work time. As you can see at the 30-minute mark, I already came through and tried a little scratch test, but it wasn't quite ready. So now I'm coming back through and I am stripping off the paint. Starting at one end and pushing down gently, I am stripping this paint off from one side to the other, and leaving the goopy remnants on that plastic bag, so it's going to make it that much easier for me to clean up here in just a moment. Then I'm simply just going to come back through with some water and wipe off this excess. I have seen people use hyaluronic acid to antique, but we are simply just going to mix up a bleach solution to get a similar effect. So I'm going to take a misting bottle and mix up a solution of 3 parts water to 1 part bleach. So I'm going to be using 3 parts or 3 tablespoons water, and then add 1 tablespoon of bleach. Again, you're going to want to wear gloves and work in a well-ventilated area. You will need paper towels or other rags for this process as well. We are going to be distressing this mirror a little bit at a time. You can always take more off. You can't replace the mirror backing once you have removed it, so it's better to do a little bit at a time. Here I'm using my spray bottle to put the solution mainly on the edges of this mirror and then a little bit in the middle. After the bleach solution has sat for a little bit, you can kind of see it working, and you can take your paper towel or rag and come back through and pat off the bleach. Now, I have done this technique on a couple different mirrors, and each mirror is different. This mirror, it took me several different coats of this bleach solution to attain the distressed look that I like. I love the look that some mirrors have of that like water spots or water damage. So to mimic that effect, I splattered bleach on the back and let it sit. And these are the results that I got by using that technique. While doing this process, it really helps to see the results you're getting by taking your mirror and holding it up to a light. Once I was satisfied with the results, now I need to start painting the back. I'm going for kind of a rusty patina type look. So I'm going to be using a blend of metallics and rust-inspired colors. For my inspiration for this blend, I simply just looked up an old rusty door on Pinterest and then copied that look as I went along. Remember, you are painting over glass, so it is going to take you a couple layers of paint, so that way it no longer has that sheer effect. I do 2 blends and then I'll come back through and add a solid color over top of that. We are going to be using this dry erase board piece in this project. So what I've done is I've done a scuff sand, and now I'm going to be priming it with Paint Couture's Premium Plus 2-in-1 primer, and I will be using their 2-inch synthetic brush to apply it. Always make sure to stir your Paint Couture products before you use them. If you guys haven't tried a Paint Couture brush yet, I highly recommend them. I love the angle to them. You can get a nice, crisp, clean, straight line when you're painting, but you can also use them on ornate details, which is something I'll be going over later. So right here, I'm simply just priming this piece to be painted. Okay, so up next, we are going to be adding this piece of mirror in the middle. So to make sure it's all centered, once again, we need to do a little bit of measuring. So it is 30 inches in height, which means 15 inches would be the middle here. So I'm going to mark that. Then I measured the width, divided that number, and marked it accordingly. The mirror piece itself measures 18 inches in height, 9¼ inches in width. 18 divided by 2 is 9. So I'm going to measure 9 inches from the center of this piece. 9¼ inches divided by 2 is about 4.6 inches. So I marked that accordingly. And now, as you can see, as I lay my mirror over top, it is completely centered. And then I just trace around my mirror so I know exactly where it is located on my board. Next up, we're going to be using this stencil by Ciao Bella and Paint Couture's embossing medium to create a beautiful raised stencil design around this mirror. As you can see, I've left a little bit of a space here between the mirror and the raised stencil, and that's because I'm going to be coming back through and adding a little piece of trim that will border and frame in our mirror. When working with embossing medium, I just like to use a gloved hand. I love how thick this acrylic plaster is. It's great for creating raised stencil designs. As you guys have seen, I like to do it a lot in my work. So I am simply just going to layer this embossing medium over top, making sure to get into all the little nooks and crannies of this stencil design. Then I'm going to take my finger and remove any excess and remove my stencil starting from one end and pulling upwards. As you can see from my video, in order for my design to match up, I have to lay it over the design that I already have down. Now, to prevent any smudging, what I will do is I'll just take my heat gun and dry that edge. So that way, when I go to layer my stencil over top, it won't smudge it. Okay, so we are going to be using this redesign with Prima mold. We want this beautiful trim, and then I have this IOD mold here as well. I'm going to be using amazing casting resin. This is a 2-part resin that has a 10-minute working time and cures white and very durable and hard when done. I like to mix my casting resin in a silicone cup. It's reusable and cleanup is much easier this way. After about 10 minutes, your molds are ready to be demolded and used. I also added the Flower Garland iFlex Wood Mold 1450 to accent this part as well. Next up, I'm going to be using the Floral and Bow Centerpiece Decorative Applique number 2881 to accent the top half of this mirror. This was another one of those trims that when I saw it, I knew exactly where it was going to go. I absolutely love these iFlex wood molds. I think that they are so convenient to use and definitely have a place in your DIY kit. Another thing I love about these molds is how easy they are to customize. For this bottom half, I needed to cut down this bow a little bit so that way it wouldn't overshadow the rest of my design that I had in mind. But I needed to kind of cover up what I had taken off. So I was able to use this daffodil wood composition, another iFlex wood mold, FL0002. And this is a peek at what we have so far. When I'm doing a project like this with molds, I like to map out the design before I glue anything down. There's definitely a bit of an underlying theme to this design. As you can see, there's angels and cherubs, there are birds and bees, there will eventually be rabbits, there are keys, there are clocks, and there are florals. The beautiful thing about art is that it's up to interpretation. So especially when I'm designing an intricate, ornate design like this, I might lay all my molds down and then come back later and completely redesign it. So what I usually do is I will lay down my molds, stop, take a photo, and then go about redesigning it. So that way I can go through my phone, flick through, and say, that is the design I liked the most. And that way I can recreate it super easily just by looking at my phone. These are some more iFlex wood molds. I have the Rose Stem Applique number 1413-1. There's also the Key Molding number 1138, the B composition set AI001, and the Angels with Hearts number 1186. So do you remember earlier that stark straight line where our trim meets up? Well, we are going to casually cover that up with a beautiful decorative floral mold. So instead of using resin this time, I am going to be using air dry clay. So what I did is I brushed my mold before I started with cornstarch. This makes it so your clay is easier to release from the mold. After pressing it in place, I'm going to remove any excess with a metal spatula and then gently release it from the mold. Once I'm happy with the placement of it, I will glue it in place. So this is a vintage inspired piece. So to add a little bit of texture to the design, we are going to be using Paint Couture's Crust. This is an acrylic plaster that has natural minerals in it, so it has a more gritty texture than their smooth plastered embossing medium. And what I'm doing here is I am just using an artist's brush and stipling it in place. Once again, I wanted this little decorative part off of this trim because I have an idea for another project for the rest of it. So what I did is, like before, I just heated the mold up, used some kitchen scissors to cut it off, and then I'm just gonna sand the edge nice and smooth with a 240 grit sandpaper. And then I'll show you here where they're gonna go in the design. Once I'm completely satisfied with my design concept, then I'm gonna go ahead and start officially gluing things down. Do you guys remember that large Mediterranean trim I used last month on the jewelry armoire? Well, guess what? I had just a few pieces left over, and this is what I'm going to use them for. To fill in this gap, I used embossing medium, and then I came back through with Paint Couture's Crust because I wanted it to have a crusty, cracked look, which you will see later on in the video. I also used Paint Couture's Crust and this rose garland stencil to add another raised stencil design and just one more design element to this piece. Okay guys, so here is a look at the whole piece before we lay any paint down. So once again, I'm going to be priming this piece with Paint Couture's Premium Plus 2-in-1 Bonding and Blocking Primer. I have found the key when painting over intricate molds like this, and just when priming or painting in general, is to not overload your paintbrush. And once again, this is why I really love the Paint Couture brushes. Not only are they good for straight lines, but their bristles are great for getting in ornate details such as this. And this is what it looked like once it was all primed. Now I specifically chose this gray color because I didn't want to completely cover it up. Remember that we're going for a Shabby Chic aged paint design. And if you ever look at something that's been painted and it's of the vintage variety, the sun has usually shined on it and elements have usually gotten to it, and it has aged the paint in different areas to where it looks darker in some points and lighter in others. Hence why I'm not completely covering up the gray with this custom mixed green color. And here is a peek at that two-toned paint job once I was all finished with that step. Then I came back through with an 80 grit sandpaper and I sanded back that crust texture that we had added earlier. I love this because not only does it bring out the texture, but it also makes it have more than just a two-toned color variation, because you can see the white, the pink, and in some spots, the original wood peeking through. Okay, so next up, I am using Candlelight, and I am going to be dry brushing over all of these molds. Not only does it bring out all the little carved details, but I've noticed that it kind of adds another element to that vintage paint design. Like we were talking about earlier, some paint will age and fade differently in some areas on a piece than others. Dry brushing is a technique where you have very little paint on your paintbrush, and then with a very light hand, you brush over top of your designs just so the very edges of paint catch. This will bring out and highlight all of these beautiful carved details. And I applied this same technique to bring out the raised stencil design. I am going to be using Antique Gold. This is part of Paint Couture's Luxe Metallic line of paint. And just like before, I am removing the majority of my paint, so my paintbrush is quote unquote dry, and then gently brushing over all of these raised details to accent them with this gold. Now that our design is all painted, we are going to age this design even more by using Paint Couture's 2-part crackle. We are going to start with step 1, which is their size medium. It is called size because depending on how thick you lay down this medium will determine the literal size of the cracks you get. The thicker you put down the medium, the larger the cracks will be. The thinner the layer you put down, the smaller your cracks will appear. I specifically did not fix that gap because I wanted it to look like this piece had warped over time. So I added a very thick layer along this gap so I could get a lot of cracks. And along the angels' faces and their chests, I am adding a thick amount and then a thinner amount just underneath the book. After about 30 minutes to an hour, your size medium should start to become tacky. That is when you put on your crackle step 2. When working with this 2-part crackle, I highly recommend that you do section by section. That way you can remember where you put your crackle size, step 1, and also you have more control over your work time. Remember earlier when I was talking about how I really wanted there to be a lot of cracking and texture along the edges? Well, you can see here, I have layered a very heavy amount of this crackle 2-step. As you can see, once it starts to dry, all these awesome cracks start to appear. And to accent these beautiful cracks and to age this piece even more, we are going to be using Paint Couture's Amber Honey Glaze. When you're glazing, I highly recommend you wear gloves and have some water, either some paper towels or baby wipes work great. Paint Couture's acrylic line has a built-in top coat to it, which means you can glaze right over top of it without sacrificing the color. One aspect that I absolutely love about this is that it enables me to take off or leave on as much glaze as I want, meaning I have complete artistic discretion. I find that it helps as I go along to wet my paper towel to take off the glaze. It's amazing how just a little bit of glaze and that crackle took that design from being freshly painted to aged in 2.5 seconds flat. When glazing intricate molds like this, I have found using a Q-tip to get into all these little nooks and crannies to take off any residual glaze that you may not like makes your job that much easier. And then I just continued on with that process, glazing the rest of the piece. Okay, you guys, let's take an up-close look at that before we move on to the last couple steps of this piece. To clean off the paint from this mirror, I'm simply just going to use an X-Acto knife and scrape off the excess paint. Here is a look at that antiqued or distressed mirror design that we came up with. You can see it has kind of a metallic rust inspired look to it, which is exactly what I was going for. And then here is a peek at the finished Shabby Chic French Baroque inspired design. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'm Renee. I'm the owner and artist behind Chicly Reclaimed Decor. You can follow me for more furniture flips as well as painting tips. And definitely be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more painting tutorials from the Paint Couture creative team.